It started with a single call, one voice, lost somewhere between fear and silence. The dispatcher heard only fragments, words fading into static. What happened next was never recorded. This is the last call. I didn't hear this case on talk radio or a late-night panel. It found me in a 2-minute audio file someone forwarded with a single line, "You should listen to this." I waited until the apartment was quiet, turned the lamp low, and pressed play. A thin ribbon of static unspooled, then wind, then a voice trying to stay steady. On the other end, an operator speaking like a metronome, calm, measured, building a box of questions for panic to sit in. West Texas at night does not hide its emptiness, it underlines it. Highways pull straight through mesquite and pasture like pencil marks someone forgot to erase. He'd run out of gas, that much was clear. The truck cooled on the shoulder while the sky kept its distance. The phone had enough battery to make calls and not enough to forgive mistakes. I won't repeat the call word for word, it doesn't belong to me. But the shape of it is simple and hard. A man said he needed help, that he'd run dry, and that someone, maybe more than one, was after him. The operator asked where. He tried to answer. Static and wind gnawed the edges of everything. You could measure the distance between them in breaths. Before the line to dispatch, he'd reached out to family. After that, the messages scattered like headlights in rain. I printed what I could, dates, minutes, numbers that proved a voice had existed in a particular slice of country. Then I did what people do when the facts stop moving. I put on headphones and tried to hear what was between the words, tire noise from a road that shouldn't have traffic, a rhythm that might be a walk, or might be fear learning to count. Weeks later I drove the same stretch. County signs nodded past like old men too tired to argue. The last open station threw a rectangle of yellow out onto the gravel. The cashier had that look you only get from working nights, half wary, half bored, all awake. "You're not the first asking," he said, and slid a cheap paper map across the counter. A deputy told me the same story in fewer words. Truck found, nobody added, footprints that led away and turned into suggestion. The shoulder where the pickup cooled is a stripe of dirt that remembers everything for about a day. After that, wind erases. I stood there long enough to let the crickets normalize, long enough to hear a semi crest a distant hill and drop a gear. It's amazing how quickly your body believes a place. Lucky places feel safe. Unlucky places feel hungry. This one felt like it wanted a second chance at last night. On the recording, the operator tries to take the darkness apart with a checklist. Cross streets. Landmarks. Direction of travel. The man gives bits and pieces, like someone rummaging in a drawer for a thing they swear used to be there. On my third listen, I wrote a note I could barely read later. He's trying to stay in one place with his voice. That's what it sounded like. Choosing words the way you choose a doorway when something is moving where it shouldn't be. He left the truck. That decision eats the rest of the story. Past the fence line the ground breaks wrong, the way pastures hide gullies and low creeks until your shins know more than your eyes. He said enough to imply motion. Headlights passed. The line crackled. Somewhere in there he reached for someone he trusted and told them he'd meet them near the road. Routes make sense in daylight, at night, they make confessions. People have run that call through every filter a laptop can offer. Slow it, clean it, subtract the hiss, boost the mid-range. Some hear another voice crowding the line. Some hear only fear echoing itself. I learned a long time ago that certainty from software is the prettiest liar in the room. What convinces me isn't a whispered syllable behind his. It's the geography. Wind where there shouldn't be wind. The way sound bounces between low fences and shallow ditches until it feels like a crowd. A retired operator let me sit at an old console after hours and listen to a training loop. "You don't chase a caller," he said. You slow the moment down so they can stand inside it. We played a sample, then another. The tone changed with each: anger, shock, numbness. In his tape, I heard decision, like a man choosing not to break while his options were doing it for him. The operator on duty held the line, kept the question steady. The night had other plans. By the broken fence I found the kind of evidence that never makes reports: a cheap bottle, half full, a torn bit of cloth that could have been anything, the way a cattle guard rings if you put your heel on it. Downfield, a pump jack nodded to itself like a tired animal. Somewhere beyond the dark, a tower blinked red, one bead of order in a lot of empty air. I tried to imagine the line from truck to pasture as a clean arrow. It kept zigzagging into maybes. In a kitchen that smelled like coffee and old worry, a woman showed me photos and let them sit between us. People always think photographs hold answers, mostly they hold the last time someone agreed to be still. She walked me through the evening again: calls, the plan to meet, the plan that moved. He wasn't himself, she said, which is something you can mean 3 or 4 ways, all of them true. I didn't press. You can be right and cruel at the same time. It doesn't help anyone get home. Back at the road the wind changed, and all at once the place felt like a room you'd walked into before you were invited. I replayed the file in the car with the engine off. The operator's voice worked the grid: where are you, what do you see, are you hurt? He tried to keep up. The line went thin, then thinner, like someone walking down a long hall, then turning a corner. Doors don't slam in the country. They breathe shut. What frightens me most about cases like this isn't the dark or the idea of a stranger in it. It's how quickly a life boils down to decisions you had to make at speed. Stay with the truck or go. Wait for help or run toward family. Turn back to the road or keep to the field where the world can't see you. I've watched people turn those choices into verdicts about a man they never met. I don't know him. I only know what a hard night asks. Timeline lovers can draw the rest without me. The truck gets tagged. Calls go unanswered. A search grid grows from a table to a pasture to a county. Volunteers show up with flashlights and good intentions, then go home with neither. The file fattens by ounces. The map develops fingerprints. And still, that thin strip of audio is the cleanest thing anyone has, the proof that at a specific minute, on a specific line, one human being asked the world to hold still. When I finally let the car idle and rolled back toward the highway, the reflector posts ticked past like a counting song. The land opened and closed, depending on what I wanted to see. I thought about the operator who caught the call and kept it in his voice until it was done. I thought about the brother, waiting near a road that can look identical in every direction. I thought about the wind getting inside a phone and making us all guess at what it meant. There's a version of this story where I end with an answer. Where I tell you the land gave up what it took, or a confession surfaced in a bar, or footprints kept being footprints all the way to a door. That version doesn't exist tonight. What I have is a truck, a pasture, and a voice that tried very hard to name a place and couldn't. Somewhere between the first breath and the last, the line went thin, and the night leaned closer. That's where I'm starting. With the call that didn't give coordinates so much as a feeling. With the space on a map where the ink runs and the margin records more silence than fact. I'll take you through the search the way it really happened, on foot, in circles, with good people making the best sense they can. For now, put your ear to the tape and listen for the only constant the land offers after dark. Not words. Not proof. Just the pressure of a world big enough to hold a man and small enough to lose him. The morning after I left the highway, I stopped at a diner that looked older than the county line. The waitress poured coffee before I asked, like everyone who's worked night shifts knows what silence looks like when it walks in. On the wall, next to a calendar from 3 years ago, someone had pinned a missing person flyer. The same face from the tape, older now in photocopy gray. When I told her I was following the case, she nodded once. "You won't find him out there," she said. Then, softer, "but you'll hear him. People out here talk about sound more than they talk about weather. A low hum that crawls through the hills after midnight. Truckers say it follows the power lines, farmers swear it comes from under the soil." I didn't believe it until I parked by the service road where the call had started and shut the engine off. The world went quiet, and then not quiet at all. It wasn't music, wasn't machinery. More like breath pressed through metal, long and even, as if the earth was remembering to inhale. I took out my recorder. Static, hiss, nothing. Then a pulse, faint, rhythmic, too regular to be wind. It matched a section from the 911 tape almost perfectly. That changed everything. The official search had ended months ago, replaced by reports written to sound like conclusions. But locals still drove by to leave plastic flowers, bottles, prayers. Each one an unanswered question pretending to be tribute. I followed the fence line until I found what was left of a gate, half buried under weeds. Beyond it, the pasture dipped into a small ravine choked with cedar and runoff. Someone had marked the ground with orange tape, long since faded to rust. When I stepped into that ravine, the sound thickened, like walking into the throat of a machine. My recorder began to skip, its red light flickering. Every few seconds the hum deepened, almost forming a note you could mistake for a word. That's when I noticed the cables. They ran shallow under the mud, copper and plastic like veins half exposed. Utility lines, maybe. Or something older. One was cut clean, as if by a blade, ends blackened not by fire but by heat. It didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like a test site. When the county archives opened, I dug through permits and land deeds. In 1977 a research company called Helixer Acoustic leased the same acreage for subsurface resonance studies. The file stopped there, no results, no closure, just a stamp, inactive. A retired deputy met me later in a parking lot behind a hardware store. He didn't like being recorded, so I wrote notes instead. He said the company had packed up after one of their machines collapsed a section of ground, leaving a crater. They called it an acoustic incident. Locals called it the hum pit. He drove me out there at sunset. The wind pushed dust like smoke across the field. What I saw wasn't a pit anymore, just a shallow bowl grown over with grass and regret. But the sound was still there. Low. Patient. Older than our explanations. He cut the engine and leaned on the wheel. "You know," he said, "when you hear it long enough, it starts answering." I laughed the way people laugh when they'd rather not. Then I stopped. Because the recorder on my lap was running hot, screen frozen. The waveform showed peaks that looked like speech patterns, 3 short, 1 long. Almost like Morse. That night in the motel I matched the hum pattern against the original call. It fit, down to the spacing between pauses. He'd been standing near this same site when he dialed for help. Maybe that's what scared him. Maybe that's what called him. When I told the deputy what I'd found, he just stared through the windshield. "The machines were supposed to find what's under us," he said. Problem is, sometimes what's under listens back. It wasn't folklore. Helixer's papers confirmed the project, buried arrays transmitting low-frequency tones to map subsurface density. Only, they never published a map. Funding cut. Personnel moved. The land sold to a private trust with no address. You can pretend that's paperwork. Or you can admit someone wanted a hole left open. By the 3rd day I stopped sleeping properly. The hum bled into dreams, the pitch rising until it sounded like breath behind glass. I'd wake thinking someone had knocked on the door. Once, the TV turned itself on to static. No signal, just the same cadence pulsing through snow. I know how this sounds. Every investigator reaches the point where reason bends under repetition. But I've worked enough cases to know when the evidence starts to learn your voice. And that's what this was doing, matching. I recorded again before dawn. This time, I spoke first. Who are you? Silence. Then the hum flickered, doubled back on itself, and for one impossible second, formed a human syllable, my own name. When the sound died, the air felt wrong. Heavy, charged, like the moment after lightning but without the strike. Outside, the horizon glowed faintly blue where it should have been black. For a heartbeat I thought I saw motion in the grass, something standing still. Then it was gone. The next morning, the motel clerk asked if I'd been playing music all night. Said guests complained about vibrations through the walls. There was no music. Just the hum. Every mystery starts as noise. Then someone decides to listen close enough to turn it into a story. And maybe that's the mistake, mistaking pattern for message. Still, I drove back to the site once more. The field waited, blank as paper. When I pressed record, nothing happened. Not even wind. Sometimes the quiet means you're safe. Sometimes it means you're next. By the fourth morning, the forest stopped pretending to be a forest. Everything felt like it was waiting, the trees, the air, the ground. The hum was gone, but its absence had weight. When sound leaves, it takes something with it. I drove back to the ravine where the cables had surfaced. A mist hung low, and each breath looked like smoke. There were no tire tracks this time, no footprints. It was as if the land had exhaled and covered its mouth. The deputy didn't answer my calls anymore. His number rang twice, then cut to static. That's when I realized I'd heard that same static before, on the tape, right before the caller's voice dissolved into noise. Patterns. Always patterns. You start chasing them, and they start chasing you back. Inside the ravine, the air trembled. Not sound, pressure. A kind of pulse you feel in your jaw, not your ears. I placed my recorder on the ground, hit record, and waited. The screen flickered. 3 short pulses, 1 long. Then silence. But when I played it back, something new was layered beneath. A distant, human breath that wasn't mine. I won't call it paranormal. If you've spent time near old equipment, you know machines remember motion. They hum in sympathy with their own ghosts. Maybe that's what this was, leftover resonance from decades of vibration. Or maybe the earth was talking back in the only language we gave it. I took soil samples, photos, and a short video. By evening, the battery drained from 80% to 0. That's not unusual in cold weather, except it wasn't cold. And the air smelled faintly of ozone, the way it does when power lines snap. On the drive back to town, the hum returned. Not loud. Just there, behind the engine, behind the road, behind my thoughts. A low, patient tone that fit between breaths. It wasn't coming from outside the car. It was coming through the radio, on a frequency I hadn't tuned. I turned the knob slowly. The sound didn't change. I turned it off. It didn't stop. I left the car running in the motel lot and sat there, hands still on the wheel. There's a kind of fear that doesn't feel like fear, just a clean, dry awareness that something knows where you are. I didn't sleep that night. At 3:17 a.m., I heard a knock from the adjoining wall. 3 short, 1 long. Same rhythm. No voices. No footsteps after. Just quiet. By morning, the manager said the next room was empty. I filed my notes, uploaded backups, and sent everything to a friend who handles audio forensics. He's the rational one, ex-sound engineer, data-only type. A week later he called, his voice slower than usual. He said the file contained an inverted harmonic, a tone that matched frequencies used in geological surveys from the 1970s. Only difference, mine wasn't inverted. It was alive. Alive. His word, not mine. He laughed right after he said it, but it didn't sound like a joke. The next part doesn't make sense on paper. 2 nights later, I woke up with the recorder still running beside the bed. I don't remember pressing record. But the playback starts at 2:04 a.m. My own breathing, faint, uneven, and then another breath, perfectly matching mine, half a second delayed. It goes on for 6 minutes before fading into that familiar hum. I try to rationalize it. Sleep recording. Sound bleed from somewhere else. Old files looping. But the metadata showed otherwise, the audio had been created fresh, no overlay, no splice. At that point I did what I should have done days earlier, I left. Packed up, drove east, and watched the tree lean shrink in the mirror until it was just a smudge. The hum followed for miles, then disappeared somewhere after Salem. Just air, just road, just a man trying not to invent ghosts. But when I reached the city and checked into a new place, the silence was worse. Urban noise covers everything, traffic, vents, people. But this silence felt personal. Like absence with an address. The next day, the audio engineer sent one last message. It contained a screenshot, the waveform from my latest recording. Under the main frequency line was a faint shadow, a duplicate signal running a few milliseconds behind. He wrote, "It's you." Echoing. That night, I played the first 911 call again. The operator's questions, the static, the panic. I'd listened 100 times before, but now I heard something I hadn't. A breath right before the final drop, matching mine. The caller didn't just vanish. He merged. What the recordings captured isn't supernatural. It's something else. A feedback loop between place and witness. Between noise and memory. Between what we investigate and what starts investigating us. The land in Oregon hums because something was left under it. Machines, power, grief, who knows. But the moment you listen too closely, it starts tuning itself to you. People think silence is the end of sound. They're wrong. Silence is just the part that listens back.